All right, guys, welcome back to our next session. Now we are going to hear more about how to drive rapid international growth at scale from Farhad. The virtual stage is yours. I'm looking forward to hear more about this topic.
Thanks, Matej. Welcome, everybody. Where's everybody logging in from? Where are you from? I'm in London, so I'm going to share my slide deck. And as you can see, the photograph on here is actually from me speaking at MGS Berlin last year. Nicer times back then. Today, I'm in my room up in North London. So everyone, I'd love to hear where everybody's just logging in from. You can post a little comment in the chat right here. There's Q&A, and I'm also going to be using the polls feature. So please watch out for the polls as and when that goes live. Yeah, just share your locations, everyone, while I'm talking. And wow, Stockholm, Sri Lanka. Wow, it must be late out there. Slovakia, nice. I'm going to talk about how to drive rapid international growth at scale. And I want to start with a little story. So back in 1916, this chap called Ollie Christensen, he started a business of his own. He was a carpenter, and he started a little workshop. But then in 1924, while his sons were playing in the workshop, they accidentally set fire to some wooden stuff, and the whole house went up in flames as a result. This chap, he rebuilt the workshop. He didn't take it as a knockback. He actually took it as an opportunity to grow. And he rebuilt the workshop, went back to doing things slightly better, slightly bigger. And his business started growing. Now, as his business grew, he was manufacturing wooden products. He made step ladders, ironing boards, stools, all sorts of usual household stuff. And he started employing people. He employed people of his own family as well. But then, believe it or not, in 1942, a second fire struck the factory and burned the whole place down once again. Our chap didn't get dissuaded. He didn't let that knock him down. He once again used this as a great opportunity to rebuild and grow. This time he had a bit more capital, so he could actually invest a bit more money in it. He started building it and came out with a bigger factory, employed more people. And so far, his business was very much in his native country. As I tell you this story, I'm going to share a little poll out here. Let's see if you can guess which company I'm talking about. Yeah, so as I said, carpenter, used to sell step ladders, ironing boards, stools. He had a fire decimate the whole business. Oh, and no cheating, no looking it up on Wikipedia. So the fire burned down the place twice over, and still our chap kept growing. Now, he was good at making ironing boards, but turned out he was really good at one particular product, which he started selling. It became quite popular in his home country. And then in 1955, he actually started exporting this product for the first time. His product had now become a range of popular products. In 1955, he started exporting it to Sweden, a few years later to Germany, and then a few years after that to Switzerland. And unfortunately, in 1960, he had a third fire that got lit in the warehouse, burned down the entire warehouse, all the wooden stock that they carried. And at that point, our chap decided that, he's had it with wood. He's going to migrate completely to using plastics, certain types of plastics to build his products. And people started loving his products. Fast forward to 2000, and this small business that I'm talking about is now a household name. Lots of people from childhood up to adults use the product. They've got movie franchises with them. They've got books. They've got movies. They've got magazines. So let's see what everybody thinks this product is. Interesting. IKEA, Lego, not Ericsson, H&M maybe, Nokia. Very interesting. So I'm going to start giving a few clues now about what the products actually were. He has movie franchises. So the founder actually died in the 60s or 70s. The sons carried on the legacy, and they've been growing the business since. It's become very famous. In the year 2002 or 3, they started having a bit of trouble. And the trouble that the business ran into was multiple suppliers leading into the business, not a lot of good control with operations. There was also talk about them having diversified too much. As I said, they used to make one core product range, which did really well. Suddenly they were doing magazines, they were doing movies, they were doing entertainment, video games, apps, all sorts of things. And they came under a bit of criticism for diversifying a bit too much and forgetting their core user base. At this point, they brought in some consultants externally, they got some help. And what they did was go back to their grassroots and say, this is what we do. This is what we do really well. These are the reasons why our users love us. Now, the product, as very few of you have guessed, is actually Lego. Lego actually started in the 1920s, 1930s with a wooden duck that you could pull and it would make its beak move. It was a great little thing back there. It was very successful in Denmark, and since then it's gotten turned into a massive range of products and so on. What is really interesting about Lego is that while their core business is the toys, that exercise they went through when times were lean brought them back to their core product, which was toys again. And with those toys, they then figured out ways to bring the same experience of play to lots of people. So they've gone from a traditional bricks and mortar, almost literally, product to having a number of very successful apps. I mean, Lego apps have had over 50 million installs on the Android store and a similar number on the Apple stores. But this time around, they've very much stuck to their core premise, to make entertaining toys and products that children as well as adults love and can play with their imagination. It's all about intelligent play. So there were 3 lessons that I want to pick up from Lego, and which I think are very relevant to this session. First of all, a real innate understanding of their customer, what their customers like about them, what their customers don't necessarily come to them about. Also, a good understanding of what is their own capability. So Lego understand that they make products that stimulate intelligent play. They're not very good at movies. They're not necessarily very good at amusement parks and things like that, though they let other people handle those things. What they're really good at is making Lego bricks and products that can be built off those Lego bricks and add to that experience. And the third thing, which is equally important, is how to scale. Now, back in the 1950s and 60s, when they started growing, as I mentioned, they started with Denmark. That was their base. It took them 20 years before they went out of Denmark and started shipping to Sweden. And then over 5 years, they expanded to 3 more countries. Fast forward to today, we find a lot of businesses do scale up very rapidly, and at times they lose sight of these 3 main lessons, as it were, from Lego. So I'm going to talk about a slightly different situation. Everyone loves Lego. I'm not sure everybody even remembers Halo. Halo was a taxi app. They grew quite well in London in the early days before Uber, and they had $100 million in venture funding to expand into the United States. And I'm not sure if you're aware, Halo basically failed massively. Their big problem was they worked well with London cabbies who all had smartphones and were not just a taxi service. A London black cab, to become a black cab driver, you have to pass some pretty difficult tests. You have to know all the small streets and corners of London inside out. And you need to be almost a tour guide in some ways of the city. Um, you take that and you translate that to New York, where the whole city's on a grid. Back then, not a lot of cabbies had uh, smartphones, and also the life of a London yellow cab driver was very different. They were not considered a premium product. They were not very well paid people. And the barriers to becoming a London cabbie, aside from getting the license, were fairly low. They didn't necessarily have to pass tests and know the city inside out and so on. So the big problem that they had is they took this model, went there, and it failed. It failed spectacularly. And a lot of people thought that the failure was down to competition. Uber had started becoming popular back then. But if you look at it very closely, the failure was not really so much about competition. It was much more about strategy. It was the fact that they had not done their market research. They hadn't figured out what the actual use case was that made people want to use Halo in London and not use Halo necessarily in New York. Um, so that's an important lesson to learn. What we found is that overseas expansion in general can be very challenging. Entering a new market is expensive. You need to understand local culture. You need to understand the use case, and then marketing channels and so on. They can be expensive. Getting it right can be expensive, and if you get it wrong, that can be very expensive as well. And then you can't necessarily test a small market in all situations. At times you have to go big or go home, which means if you fail when going big, you fail big, time and very publicly. Um, what my agency does is we help businesses grow globally in a relatively painless manner. And we use technology a whole lot to do that. We also have a multilingual, multinational team. So we help businesses break down those barriers of language and geography, which very often tend to be a challenge for a lot of smaller as well as larger businesses. Um, Now, what we do is we offer digital advertising, we offer SEO and ASO, we offer social media marketing, and then we do all of this in multiple languages. The sort of brands that we help are fairly well-known brands, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them with a case study further on. So this is just an introduction about us to give you a bit of an understanding as to why I'm well placed to talk about this. This is my bread and butter. It's stuff I've been doing for the past nearly 20 years. And over the past year, one of the things that we did was start studying what makes businesses succeed and what makes other businesses fail when they try to grow internationally, when they go out of their local market into a national spectrum and then maybe into an international spectrum. And one of the interesting things we found, in fact, three interesting things we found, was that businesses that succeed at growing globally typically understand who their customer is and why those customers are buying into their service. This is not so much about what you believe is the case, but having an innate understanding, almost learning that from your customers and really understanding what is that one or two pain points that you as a business are solving for your customers. And whether you're an app that's a utility and people download it, or whether you're an entertaining app, there's always something that you are doing uniquely for your customers that nobody else does. And understanding that and understanding who those people are that use your app is extremely important. Once you understand that based on a core small audience, the brands that succeed at globalizing are able to then build that core model and localize it very quickly across multiple markets. So they sort of form a template where they've understood, yes, the businesses or the people who are buying into our service, into our product, into our app, like us because of X, Y, and Z. These are the people or peoples, the persons who are buying into it. And this is what they really like about it. And when I translate it from, say, the UK to France to Germany to the USA and so on, that core pain is not going to change. The way it's expressed and the way I talk about it may change, but at the end of it, I'm doing one core thing. In the case of Lego, they're building intelligent play toys which children as well as adults find stimulating and creative. In the case of Halo, they didn't quite get that right, and that's why they failed. So businesses that succeed at globalization do these three things without fail. And what we found, very interestingly also, was that the businesses that use this framework of growth are 3 times more likely to succeed. It's 3.2 or 3.3. They're more than 3 times as likely to succeed as businesses that don't actually follow this framework. The biggest challenge that we found in our study, and we're looking at over 1,000 apps and brands and regular bricks and mortar businesses also that have grown internationally. And what we found was the biggest challenge businesses face is that first point, truly understanding customer data and figuring out what it is, that pain point that they are actually fulfilling for customers and building up their marketing model based on that. It isn't an easy task. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it isn't as simple as that. So the way we do it and our approach to it is always start with a niche. Even if you are an app which is going to have mass appeal, don't start hitting everybody. Start with going with a very focused audience, identify that audience whom you think is going to definitely latch onto your product and use it, whether it's a game or a utility app or a bricks and mortar business, whatever it is. Start with a very small niche, figure out which is that place where there's no competition that is as good as you, and really you have a right to kill in that organization. So I don't mean figuratively. You will kill it. You will kill the competition in that place. Identify who the customers are once you start building up that presence in that space. Understand that marketing model, why they're latching on to your messaging, what that messaging is that works really well. And only once you've got those first 3 bits right, should you start scaling internationally. And when you scale internationally, treat each market as a testing ground for the hypotheses on those first 3. Now, I know this sounds all very technical and kind of up there. I'm going to explain how we do this literally with a case study. So the case study I'm talking about first is UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship. This fine gentleman here, some of you might recognize, his name's Conor McGregor. He's quite a notorious character in the world of mixed martial arts. But anyways, UFC started as an organization in Las Vegas. They were very much a small, at times not very well looked upon martial arts sport. The world of boxing, the world of wrestling was well established. MMA and UFC came around much later in the day, and they weren't very well regarded. It was looked at like street fighting and brawling. But then the founder of UFC, Dana Hardy, they got together and they turned the sport around. They worked with us to expand in Europe. So they started being quite well established in the USA. They weren't very well known outside of the USA. They came to us and they asked us to help them grow in Europe. And over the years, we've finessed the way we do this. And what I'd like to share is just the methodology. So every new market that we break into for the UFC, we always start by raising brand awareness. Now, the way we raise brand awareness is we've looked into the existing data, we've looked at who likes UFC through our Facebook presence, who visits the website through Google Analytics, how these people interact. We understand what these people's affinities are. So, are they people who like wrestling typically, or are they people who like boxing? Or maybe they're people who actually don't like wrestling and boxing, and those people tend to be quite purists, and they might be regular sports fans. We've understood that audience, and we take the same audience in the next country we go into. We start building awareness with that audience, getting those people to talk about it. We focus purely on just acquiring fans, sharing the content, building social engagement. During the first 6 months that we launch in a new market, we don't even talk about buying anything, paying for anything. It's just massive awareness and engagement. Only a bit down the line will we actually then talk about events and selling tickets to events, maybe pay-per-view membership and so on, TV rights, things like that. Now, UFC is a bit of a different case, obviously, because it's a very much in-person visual thing, but the premise is very clear. You start with a core audience that you know works well. In this case, there are MMA fans, people who like karate, people who like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, people who like football, and then you grow from there. And you build that marketing model and you take it from one country to another, and it works without fail. We see that over time, and a lot of you will be aware of UFC now in Europe. Um, the results, as you can see, last year, I think UFC was the second biggest sports Facebook page in the world. In terms of sports leagues, we had 5.9 million fans in Europe alone, 314 million engagements, and 1 billion video views in 2019. Some of the biggest fights we worked on was UFC 229. That was Khabib Numa whatever versus Conor, where they ended up hitting each other with chairs. I'm sure you guys saw the pressers for that. UFC 205, then also Maymac, the Mayweather versus McGregor. All of those were brilliant. And we brought it to a stage where UFC London, 2020, sold out in less than a day. Unfortunately, the event itself couldn't go on, but that's the power of getting it right. Another brilliant example was with Jamie Oliver in Penguin Random House. And here again, the same principle applied. Jamie wanted to reach a new audience. He wanted to get people who don't typically buy cookbooks to start buying a cookbook, eat healthy, and prepare their meals at home. And what Jamie did was his team and Penguin Random House, they asked us, okay, how do we get young men to start buying cookbooks and eat healthy? And again, the premise is the exact same. Now, we needed to do this in the UK, we needed to do this in Canada, in Australia, in Germany, Netherlands. Jamie's got quite a wide appeal internationally. And this time it was different because we were actually targeting a whole new audience. So we know what the core cookbook fans like, but we needed to understand very quickly, as soon as the book was released, how do we get this whole new audience, and how do we get this audience in multiple countries? So once again, you do the same exercise. You look at your Google Analytics, you look at your Facebook Analytics, your Facebook Insights. If you have a LinkedIn, you look at LinkedIn, you look at Twitter, you understand what your audience likes. You can look at affinity audiences on Google Analytics. On Facebook, you can look at insights. On Twitter, you can see the sorts of other topics that people tweet about when they also follow you. You get all of that insight, and you start building up a persona, a sort of model of what your audience actually looks like, what they enjoy, what they do, what they don't do. And in Jamie's case, we understood that, yeah, there are young men whom we want to target. These young men, surprise, surprise, they like gaming, they like movies, they like traveling, and young women who are busy professionals as well, traveling, movies, etc. And so the creative message then, which we start testing and deploying as it goes, ends up being along those bits and pieces. It's telling them how to cook, how to eat healthy, and so on, in a medium that appeals to them. And at all times, we're taking this message, we're rolling it out, testing what's working, what's not working. And the messages that are working, we push them more and more to get further and further out there. Once again, this was a massive success. It was one of the biggest selling cookbooks of all time. We sold over 1 million copies worldwide, and it was the #1 selling book on Amazon for that year. So that's all from me. I think we have a little bit of time for some questions. So by all means, if you have any
questions in the Q&A section, which is great. And we have 3 more minutes, so I think we can answer both. So Rick is asking, how do you build brand awareness socially with the social algorithms drowning out of the organic reach?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's a difficult one for everybody. The short and sweet answer is, unfortunately, you cannot rely on organic alone. You have to use organic along with paid media on social if you want to build rapidly. If you rely on organic alone, you have to have an existing user base. So even for a brand like Jamie or a brand like UFC, they've got 5, 10, I think UFC's got 25 million something followers. We don't rely just on organic, because you will have only a fraction of your audience actually looking at your posts and your content. You cannot rely on virality. Virality works once in a while. It's never given. And if you build your business just purely on organic, your business is up to the whims and fancies of people and algorithms, which is never a good way to do it. So you have to, you don't have to spend the millions, but you do have to spend some money to guarantee visibility. There's no going around it, unfortunately.
Thanks. And we have one more question. Dave is asking, as a part of your launch and engagement strategy, are you using influencers to help drive engagements?
Yes. So it depends. A lot of businesses today tend to use influencers. 20 years ago, a number of businesses did as well. Back then, influencers were just celebrities, so you'd have Tiger Woods promoting a watch brand, or you'd have Lewis Hamilton promoting certain things, and so on. And Leo DiCaprio was famous for promoting a watch brand. You had George Clooney promoting a coffee brand, and so on. They're still influencers. It was the old-fashioned way of influencer marketing. Today, influencer marketing happens much more online, but the model doesn't change. I think it depends on the business. You definitely should consider influencers. Which influencer you consider depends on your brand, on your business, on the product. You don't want to just choose somebody who's got a lot of followers, because that doesn't necessarily mean they are the right sort of people for your business, or that they're the sort of people that the influencer themselves might not be somebody who necessarily is a good brand ambassador for you. And just because they have followers doesn't mean those followers actually necessarily listen to them for advice on whatever it is you're selling. So it should be part of the mix, but just be very careful on whom you're using as an influencer, and measure everything always. So understand who your clients are, who your customers are, and why they would listen to the influencer. And then once you've done it, test and see whether or not it was worth it. So don't just go very big and assume things will work.
Thank you very much. We are almost out of the time. I enjoyed really much this session. Thank you.